Welcome to the Medical Device Made Easy podcast. Here is Munir Lazouzi from easymedicaldevice.com. And today we will try to help you to understand how to manage your clinical evaluation if you have some high risk products. And with me, I have Dr. Bassil Akra from QUNIQUE, and he will help us to understand that through the different new requirements mainly, and also about the new groups that are created, like the expert panel group that is normally here also to evaluate your work or all the clinical information that you are providing to the notified body. So Bassil, welcome to the Medical Device Made Easy podcast.
Thank you, Munir, for inviting me to be part of your new podcast. Congratulations again for your success the past months and years. Happy to be here with you to talk to you about the expert panel and their preparation and readiness for manufacturers and notified bodies to be able to serve them. So Bassil Akra is my name. I work at QUNIQUE. I'm a CEO and co-owner of this company, and happy to support you with answering some of the questions regarding expert panel.
Yeah, I think it's really important because with the transition between MDD and MDR, there was more requirements in terms of clinical evaluation. And I think it's something that we need to clarify because there is a lot of customers that maybe don't understand that or don't really understand what they will do with their devices if they don't have clinical data. Or even if they have clinical data, they should understand that there is more steps now with the MDR than before. So we are trying to look at that. But can we start at the beginning just to explain maybe what are the new requirements in terms of clinical evaluation for medical devices with the EU MDR, because there is more. So what are they?
So if we look on a clinical evaluation and try to understand what is the difference between the directive and the regulation, the difference is actually can be split into two parts. The first part is that everyone is saying Europe is expecting more clinical evidence. And this is related to the fact that the European system is limiting the possibility to have equivalency unless you have a demonstration of equivalency, which was already under the directive a requirement, but now it's an enforced requirement. So it's enforced because people are expecting you to do that, and they are not trying to follow, let's say, different approaches anymore, because harmonization is getting much stronger in Europe, and notified bodies are expecting nearly the same expectation from manufacturers with regard to equivalency. The second point is related to special devices, which are class 3 and implantable devices, where with the new regulation, the expectation is to have clinical data from a clinical investigation. And for those devices, manufacturers are required to do clinical studies to be able to fulfill the requirement, unless they have already clinical data which is justifying safety, performance, and clinical benefit of the device when used as intended.
So in terms of that, so notified bodies are reviewing all those information now. I mean, they have to review that. I also saw that they have the MDCG also issued a specific template, if I can say, for them to review clinical evaluation reports. So it is really well guided, if I can say. We are really paving the route for manufacturers and for notified bodies to do that. So it means that we know already what we are looking for within those requirements.
I mean, MDCG is doing a great job at giving us more clarity. We never had such an amount of guidance before, so we are getting more guidance. But more clarity would mean more efforts to fulfill these requirements, because suddenly now notified bodies need to fulfill the expectation on writing a clinical evaluation assessment report, which is getting too much detailed report. And with this will push manufacturers to create much more evidence, because they are seeing now what is the notified body questions would be in the clinical evaluation assessment report, which will be, by the way, applicable for all devices. The first idea to create such an assessment report was to address the devices which will undergo a clinical evaluation consultation. We're going to talk about this later on during our exchange today. But then now what we see that notified bodies are expected to use this template for all classes, which means that for 2A, 2B device and the class 3, they need to write such a report. And if they need to write such a report, they're going to expect the same level of information from the manufacturer in the clinical evaluation report, which is understandable when you look to the regulation. The regulation is not differing between 2A and class 3. They are expecting the same level of evidence for all classes of devices.
Okay, so it means that what we thought will be helpful at the end is not really helping, it's creating more problems.
Yeah, because if you need to write a detailed report with a lot of expectation, the effort on documentation is getting higher, which means that to be able to fulfill all of these expectations, notified bodies will need more time. Manufacturers will get more questions. So somehow it is helpful that you know what is expected. And therefore, on the other side, you need to make sure that manufacturers deliver the pieces of the answer in a way that the notified bodies can do their job in a lean way. But if you don't have the answers already as a manufacturer, then the notified bodies will be asking these questions because they have to fulfill the obligation of writing such a report. Okay, so
as we've said, the MDR is increasing the requirements. The MDCG increased that by providing guidance for all classes. So notified bodies now, when they will review the clinical information, if I can say, they will have made really a full review of everything. So everything should be secured. But now we are introducing the expert panel, so which is something that is additional to all this. So what is the impact then for the medical device industry to have this expert panel, which is, if we remember, for class 3 and class 2B,
it's actually specific devices, yes.
So what is now the impact of having that there?
So let me explain first of all, because to make clear which devices are impacted. Here we are referring to class 3 implantable. So just the class 3 implantable devices, and class 2B, which are to introduce and or remove medicinal substance and body fluids from the human body, which are according to Rule 12 of the classification rules of the medical device regulation, which are Rule 12, class 2B. For those devices, the medical device regulation is expecting from notified bodies to consult an expert panel to get an opinion. Similarly, like we at that time in the past when we had the drug device combination, notified bodies were not allowed to do the job alone. They need to consult an authority with regard to the drug. Now, with regard to those devices, notified bodies are required to consult an expert panel to get an opinion on the clinical evaluation and their work, what they have done as an assessment. And the expert panel will provide an opinion, which is telling the notified bodies how they see it. And this opinion has to be considered by the notified body in their closure of assessment and decision making. And this is the so-called enforced consultation of notified bodies. It's not applicable for all class 3 implantable. The MDCG guidance documents, which were issued in the past months, gave us some clarities regarding which devices are impacted. So if you have an MDD device moving to the medical device regulation, you don't need to have a clinical evaluation consultation unless the device will be modified and modified in a way which is actually introducing an impact on the benefit risk profile of the device, which is a negative impact, then a clinical evaluation consultation will be necessary. So this clinical evaluation consultation will be necessary for new devices or for devices with a design which is changing in comparison to the past. We had also some additional guidance with regard to this to give us some clarities on when will the expert panel be willing to provide an opinion. So it's not every time when you share the document, an opinion will come back. So this is very essential, and therefore it's highly recommended by manufacturers to look to their device, to their design, and understand whether an expert panel opinion is necessary or not, because this will have an impact on the timeline of the submission.
So it means that it's the manufacturer who has to really evaluate that, investigate that, or the notified body is also helping them to say, I think an expert panel will be needed for this one.
So the manufacturer is the first one in the row to prepare the documentation and to justify the differences if they are moving from MDD or active implantable medical device directive to the regulation, to say what kind, to give the transparency, to clarify what kind of changes they have implemented. If they implemented changes which are just to address the MDR requirement, then they need to make it clear, because based on this information, the notified body will need to make a conclusion on whether an expert panel involvement is necessary or not. So
when we say expert panel, so can we maybe just clarify now who will be inside this expert panel? Because if I remember, there was a kind of a public request from the EU Commission to hire people, so they provided really guidance, even how much they will be paid, what they will be doing, etc. So who are the people that are selected now? Do we have a list? Is it public or?
The list is not public yet, but the European Commission created a website, and I can share with you the link to that website where you're going to find the information when they are available. So they are currently working on the finalization, because they elected the experts. So to give you an example, who are the experts, you ask? Those are applicants who fulfilled the requirement as they were published by the European Commission. And they have been elected by the Commission to be actually experts who can act for the European Commission and deliver an opinion. So those are professors, perhaps from university hospitals, other subject matter experts who fulfill the requirement and are willing to act for the Commission. And then their name will be publicly available. And depending on the type of device, so if you are dealing with a cardiovascular new device or you are dealing with an ophthalmologist device, the expert panel will be elected based on the needs, based on the relevant question which is necessary. And so at this moment, what we know is that the expert panel are available, but they are undergoing a training process to be able to be prepared to deliver services in the future. One important point, that those expert panel will be providing an opinion to notified bodies, but the regulation is talking about also a voluntary consultation. But till now, we don't know whether this voluntary consultation will be available at the beginning. Based on my knowledge, this voluntary consultation will not be available at the beginning, because it's voluntary for the Commission as well as for the system. And this is actually, the voluntary consultation is intended to deliver an opinion to the manufacturers in advance on their clinical strategy, based on the fact that the notified bodies currently, they do not do any kind of pre-assessment anymore. So the Commission created this expert panel voluntary consultation, but we will not have it on time. What we're going to have the enforced expert panel, as I mentioned, when notified bodies are required to get an opinion from subject matter expert on their clinical evaluation assessments.
So something that you just said, so when notified bodies require an opinion, can notified bodies say, no, I don't require your opinion, I move forward and I approve it?
If they fulfill, they have the notified bodies based on Article 54 of the regulation, they are required to involve the expert panel unless they fulfill the requirement of not doing a clinical evaluation consultation, because the device is an MDD device, which was not actually, let's say, modified from moving from legacy to the MDR, but is the same device. Then they can document that they don't need to provide, to get an opinion from the expert panel. Now, what we need to consider that the medical device regulation is saying anyhow, anytime when the notified bodies are doing a clinical evaluation assessment of a class 3 implantable or a class 2B rule 12, which is fulfilling what we discussed before, they are required after certification to upload their assessment to EUDAMED. As soon as we have EUDAMED, this is for sure, so we need to keep this into consideration. But this means that even if the notified bodies will not provide get an opinion, they are still required to be transparent on when they got an opinion and when not. And this will be achieved through the EUDAMED system, which is going to ensure transparency about the whole process.
Okay. Now, I think it's important here, because one point that I was thinking now, I'm saying, okay, but if I am now a manufacturer of a class 3 device, new class 3 device implantable, and I want to put that on the market, and I require then the notified body to give me the certificate, are we blocked here because we have no expert panel, or the notified body can move forward because there is no expert panel?
The notified bodies are, in case there is an expert panel involvement required, like I have a completely new device entering the market for the first time, and there is no expert panel process up and running, and you are required to involve them, you are not allowed as a notified body to issue a certificate before the expert panel is available. So I remember from my time when I was at the notified body, I was clearly informed by the authority that if there is an expert panel involvement necessary and there is no expert panel, then the certification decision cannot be made without the expert panel. This means that the notified body can start their work, but they cannot finalize it until they get the expert panel opinion. But the European Commission did a good job in publishing a document recently where they clarified when the expert panel is going to provide an opinion. And actually, you will see out of this document that the Commission want to make it as a special case to provide an opinion. So not to have it as a standard case like everyone was expecting, but even if the notified body is going to submit for an expert panel opinion, as you know, in the regulation, it's written in 21 days, the expert panel need to decide whether an opinion is required or not. And if you look to the criteria which were published by the European Commission, they actually don't want to provide an opinion for every case. They want to make it in special cases that they provide an opinion. So they make it actually very reasonable, and they want to avoid that the expert panel will be a bottleneck, which is very supportive and really towards a lean process on involving expert panel just in very critical cases, ensuring that the notified bodies are doing the assessment solely and just in special cases that the expert panel will come back with an opinion.
No, I think it's great. Flexibility is always helping everybody. And as you mentioned, it's something that then you are not really blocked because they will not try to ask an expert panel to make an evaluation of a product that has no kind of danger or is not like a high risk one. So in terms of expert panel, we talked also about the voluntary consultation. Here, is it something that every manufacturer can request, or just the class 3 and class 2B devices, special 2B devices?
I mean, the hope would be that every manufacturer is able to request that. But if you look to the regulation, like I mentioned, it's a voluntary consultation. So it's a free decision to go and consult those expert panels. And if you look to the regulation is just referring to class 3 implantable and class 2B, which are to introduce or remove medicinal substance. Now, if we want to make a hope, the hope should be that every manufacturer would have an ability to get such a consultation. The problem is that those expert panels will provide an opinion, but it is not binding, and your notified body will be taking a decision. So if you want to get an opinion, it's better to get an opinion from you or from me, because we are much more familiar with the expert, let's say, feedback of a notified body than an expert panel who is introduced for the first time into the system and doesn't have the knowledge about the expectation of a notified body and how notified bodies will be acting.
Because what we said, as you mentioned about the people that will be on this expert panel, it's not like people that maybe had a lot of industry experience. It's more like, as you said, people that are maybe professors that are studying at the university, etc. So can there be a kind of a mismatch, if I can say, in terms of expectation? Because one will say, oh, we think it's okay, but the notified body will say, no, it's not, because there is some issues.
It would happen. I mean, I remember when I was at the notified body, we were hiring clinicians, for example, which are professional clinicians, and you don't need to train a clinician to be a cardiovascular surgeon or to be an orthopedic surgeon. But we need to train them on the regulatory framework to explain to them how you deal with the requirements. And I'm not sure how the Commission will be dealing with this, because you can't train them, but it takes a lot of time. And at the notified body, when we hired the physician, they needed at least 1 year, at least, to understand the rules and to really be regulatory-wise well-equipped to give a feedback with regard to non-conformities related to the requirement. So I assume that the opinion of the expert panel will be much more focusing just on the clinical or let's say other aspect where they are delivering a professional background, but they will not be able to build the correlation directly from the beginning between their expectation and the regulatory requirement. And I think there is a need for a lot of training to make sure that this is happening, avoiding that you have this mismatch, which you just mentioned, because this mismatch could lead to a lot of problems in the system and could lead to a lot of discussion which are not necessary. Manufacturer will be looking for an initial consultation, voluntary consultation, because they want to understand whether they are on the right pathway and they want to reduce the risk of repeating activities. And the problem is that the notified bodies are not involved in such meetings. So my recommendation to any manufacturer who's going to take and make use of this voluntary consultation as soon as it is available, because we don't know if it will be available at all. If it's available, that they just do such a consultation when they have the notified bodies already selected, and they take the notified body with them to such a meeting to make sure that the notified body can at least comment on the strategy and provide the expert panel with their feedback on how they see some activities.
No, I think it's interesting because, as you said, it's not legally binding, so it's not like something that they will provide a report that you can use to say that they told me that, so I will do it, etc. But as you've said, also we can have this voluntary consultation, if I can say, from this expert panel. Do we need to pay for that, or it's something that is free of charge?
Nothing is free of charge, as you know. So I think if you the expert need to be paid, as you recognize from the European Commission, and someone needs to recover those costs. And we don't know what will be the cost of such a, let's say, scientific advice meeting yet, but we know from experience with EMA, with competent authorities, they deliver such services for drug substances or for drug device combination, and they are always chargeable meetings. So they put a fee. We don't know a lot about the fee structure yet, but this will be made public as well from the European Commission as soon as the system is up and running. What we know is that they're going to differ between big companies and small companies. So big companies will need to pay more than small companies based on what we learned from the previous years in the discussion that was happening in the preparation of the expert panel.
Okay, so I think it's great because, we have really to have a lot of transparency on this process so that we can define a strategy. I imagine some companies that say, oh, my consultant cost me more than this voluntary consulting panel, so maybe I will go to the consulting panel instead of going to my consultants, and maybe, this is kind of thing that can happen, and it's why we need to have some transparency here for explaining them what is the pathway and what are the difficulties, and the fact also that this has no legally, it's not legally binding. So at the end, what they are saying is just an opinion. So we have really to take that into account, but it cannot help also at the end. Okay, so I think, here it's an important discussion that maybe we'll have in future because things are in process to be prepared. But as we've said, we have already with the MDR more requirements. We have now more requirements with the guidances that we are finding from the MDCG. We have now more requirements with the expert panel. So it's like with that, I suppose, I mean, I'm not sure, but I suppose that it cannot, a scandal like the PIP scandal cannot happen anymore then.
I think this is a very interesting point that you're just mentioning. I'm not sure if the expert panel and the whole harmonization will avoid scandals. Scandals are, we are referring to a fraud situation, and fraud cannot be controlled in any business area. So we saw it already, not just in the medical device field, in other fields as well. It's a kind of risk mitigation that we are seeing here, but it is not, there is no risk that you can go up to zero. So you can't mitigate the risk to zero. You can't mitigate it to an acceptable level. And if someone wants to create, let's say, a new fraud situation, we will see it again coming with the best regulation ever. So there is no possibility to avoid 100% such a situation again.
Okay. No, I think it's important also to mention that the fact that we have this new regulation is not here to help avoiding these kind of scandals. The thing is really to also, the objective is also to follow, if I can say, the technology that we are having with all the new software technologies, with all the new things that are coming in future that we are not regulated with the previous regulation. Now it is with the new one. So it's more that we are following than scandals, because we are sure that anybody that wants to make a scandal can make a scandal. So it's not like a regulation like this one that can stop it. But I think it's important to remember that, to remind that to the people. in terms of QUNIQUE now, so forgot TÜV SÜD because you were TÜV SÜD, now you are QUNIQUE. So you are helping, I suppose, now a lot of manufacturers. I think we had the episode 100 where you said mainly specifically that you want now to move to help more manufacturers. So what are you doing now at QUNIQUE and how you are helping those manufacturers?
So QUNIQUE is helping manufacturers in different business areas. So we are helping manufacturers who are innovators, startups starting from scratch. We build them the quality management system to prepare them for the requirement for IVDR, for MDR. So we start from scratch, but we also help manufacturers who are already on the market and wanted to move from MDD to MDR or IMDD to MDR or IVDD to IVDR. So we do all kinds of activities. We help with the quality management system. We write SOPs for manufacturers. We build the quality management system for the manufacturers. We train them on the requirement, prepare them to understand the requirement, to educate them toward the future. But we also help them on moving their technical documentation from the old system to the new system by looking to their current status, building up gap analysis, telling them where are the gaps, working with them on closing those gaps, but also on moving towards the MDR and IVDR in a lean way, because complexity is something that we need to avoid. And therefore, we help manufacturers preparing for the new requirement, which is not new anymore. It's many years old, but it is new for a lot of organizations. But we help them understand it and implement it accordingly. So we do all of these activities with a special attention on what we discussed today. Clinical is the biggest burden for a lot of manufacturers. So we try to help them also understand what are the obligations on a clinical side for the different classes, what are the post-market requirements, and help them also prepare for the changes in a way that they feel confident in this period also where notified bodies are still not certifying virtually. And therefore, we try to help manufacturers understanding how they should settle their project plan to ensure that they make best use of this, let's say, remaining time till date of application to make actually their system up and running whenever the notified bodies can start auditing them according to the new obligations.
No, I think it's great. And the fact that you are coming from a notified body, I suppose, is helping you a lot to tell them exactly what are the rules that they have to follow, what are the obstacles that they can maybe get, and how you can overcome those obstacles.
Yeah, it's always good to speak the same language of the counterpart. And I think this is a big benefit by being actually an expert who was also involved in the MDR and IVDR designation of a notified body according to the new rules, which you have actually the experience and the knowledge what authorities are expecting from notified bodies and what notified bodies will be expecting from a manufacturer.
No, I think it's great. So I really recommend you to call Bassil Akra. So where people can follow up with you then?
You can find us on the different social media. You can reach out to us, but you will find also under our website, QUNIQUEGroup.com, you can find all kinds of information. And if you want to contact us, it's very easy, info@QUNIQUEGroup.com. And then you can reach out to us and you ask us what you are looking for. And we are happy to get back to you with our service packages and help you prepare for the changes.
No, great. So thank you, Bassil, and I'm sure this will help a lot of manufacturers that are looking now for a solution, maybe to move forward with their certification. Okay, so great. So thank you, Bassil. I will put anyway all the links on the show notes that we talked about today, so that people can follow up with you and also can look at. We talked about the expert panel, so the link about the expert panel, and then to be ready as soon as this is available. Okay, so thank you, Bassil. Thank you for all the people that are listening to the podcast. So we are now reaching a high level. We are now in our second part of our journey from the 100th episode to the 200th episode. So follow up with us. So don't forget to go to the YouTube channel to subscribe and also to provide us some comments there. If there is any comments, I will provide that to Bassil. So if you can answer to them. And don't forget also, if you are listening to the podcast on your car or while you are doing your workout, Don't forget also to go and to provide a review on the podcast providers, so Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify. Okay, so thank you, Bassil, and I hope to see you to another episode for another topic, and maybe again this one if we have more information about the expert panel.
Thank you, Munir, for inviting me to be here, and looking forward for the future podcast. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. I wish you a nice day. Bye-bye.